Chapter 26:12, Come. Chapter 26:12, Come. Ling Han smiled calmly, and then rubbed a hand over his face. You. Luo Fuming raged immediately because Ling Han had already turned into Li Long in appearance, and his aura was also the same. Naturally, Luo Fuming instantly recalled the pain of losing his son. He laughed loudly, but it was filled with incredible menace. How bold! How bold! You actually dare to appear in front of me. Ling Han smiled. It was you fleeing in panic previously, wasn't it? Luo Fuming couldn't help but be struck speechless. Actually, he had not fled in panic previously, but rather could only leave reluctantly because he could do nothing against Ling Han, who possessed the divine demon sword. But as a seventh heaven celestial king, he actually was unable to suppress a third heaven celestial king, so how could he bring himself to debate the issue with Ling Han? Today, I will definitely take your life, Luo Fuming declared coldly, filled with absolute confidence. Though Ling Han's cultivation level had increased, and Luo Fuming was still where he had been, so it seemed like the scales of victory were even more inclined towards Ling Han, Luo Fuming knew just how amazing the means of spiritual attack he had grasped was. Even the mind of an eighth heaven celestial king could be destroyed with a single strike from him in a moment of carelessness. As for a fourth heaven celestial king, he admitted that Ling Han's physique was extremely tough, but the spirit was the hardest to cultivate. Was there any possibility that it was indestructible? Ling Han clapped his hands together. What I want is this resolve from you. Come. A seventh heaven celestial king should be the best opponent for him now. That should be enough to make his fighting spirit blaze, and allow him to break through to the fifth heaven. Pay back with your life for my son's death. Luo Fuming moved. He was shouting, releasing a world-shaking roar. Even if one had attained the seventh heaven celestial king tier due to the special conditions of the celestial king graveyard, whether they were king tier or emperor tier, the cultivation level was still genuine. How could their battle prowess be underestimated? Moreover, Luo Fuming's eyes turned completely black. He delivered a spiritual attack aimed directly at Ling Han's mind. This was the most terrifying attack. Even if Ling Han had prepared himself, it was useless. He felt a great tremor in his mind. It really was like a great wave emerging in the ocean, shaking him harshly. Right at this moment, Luo Fuming's attack also reached him. A palm strike approached, turning into thousands of streaks of force, and intending to render heavy injury to Ling Han. Ling Han forcefully repressed the agony in his spirit, and repaid Luo Fuming with a palm strike of his own. Pang! The two of them exchanged blows once. Ling Han couldn't help but stumble, and took a number of steps back. His expression also became extremely ugly. In terms of true battle prowess, Ling Han was definitely not inferior to Luo Fuming, but having the latter send a spiritual attack right into his spirit affected his ability to counter, causing Ling Han to be inferior to Luo Fuming in this exchange. Moreover, the spiritual attack also caused some slight injury to his spirit. A seventh heaven king tier was not fearful, but being influenced by the black chi, he had learned the means for spiritual attack, making him now a seventh heaven monarch star, and that was what was frightening. Haha, you can't even withstand a single blow. When Luo Fuming saw that this strike had taken effect, he couldn't help but laugh loudly. He approached again, sending out his fists in a series of punches, and multiple spiritual attacks were also embedded within his punches, bombarding Ling Han endlessly. Ling Han was not shocked, but rather overjoyed. He had deliberately walked out to challenge Luo Fuming, and that was because the latter could exert enough pressure on Ling Han, allowing his fighting spirit to soar, and thus helping him break through to the fifth heaven. Ling Han did not speak, and merely raised his fists to meet his opponent. The power of the 9 transformations divine scroll wrapped around his fists, causing his attack power to be greatly boosted. Pang! 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 The two of them clashed again. It was clear that Ling Han was at a disadvantage. It could not be helped. Luo Fuming's spiritual attack was not something Ling Han could block at all. It would be effective every single time, causing a sharp pain in his spirit, and thus affecting his battle prowess. Furthermore, this kind of spiritual attack would also have an extremely strong harmful effect on the spirit, and after clashing several thousand times, Ling Han felt like his head was about to explode. He had to think of some way to deal with this kind of spiritual attack. Otherwise, it was only Luo fuming now, but what if he encountered Jiyu Hurry, Xiaoingxiong, and the company in the future? Sixth Heaven Supreme Monarch stars were themselves far stronger than Luo fuming's type, and adding this kind of spiritual attack, Ling Han would be completely unable to resist. Even if he broke through to the fifth heaven, whereby his standard battle prowess allowed him to be unafraid of Xiaoingxiong and the like, the spiritual attack was still a barrier that he had to think of some way to overcome. This Luo fuming was his best sparring partner. Boom. Boom. They clashed endlessly. Luo fuming naturally was unconcerned about clashing with Ling Han. He had the full upper hand now, and it was instead Ling Han that would suffer spiritual damage after exchanging a blow with him. Even if the damage suffered every time was extremely small, it would accumulate, and it was not impossible that it would build up to a point that Ling Han's mind would just explode. Die. 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 Luo fuming roared harshly. Being affected by the black qi, he was already very bloodthirsty, and adding the grief after his son's death, he became even more berserk. Previously, Ling Han had also been influenced by the black qi. He knew how the spiritual attack was used, but after expelling the black qi from his body, he was no longer able to use this ability. All that was based on the black qi. Thus, the more black qi one obtained, the higher the grade would be, and the more terrifying one's spiritual attack would become. There was no way Ling Han would absorb the black qi. This thing was too malicious. It could influence one's mind, so he could only find some kind of solution through Luo fuming. Previously, Ling Han had also repeatedly sustained this kind of attack, so it was natural that he had long since begun to ponder on a strategy to deal with it. His original method was using the indestructible Heaven's Scroll to boost his spirit, but he discovered that this was completely useless. Even a heavenly venerate technique had no effect. No. Ling Han shook his head internally. Even divine metal could effectively block out the influence of the black qi, so how could the indestructible Heaven's Scroll be inferior instead? This was because he had come to a new realm, where the various regulations were different from the celestial realm. After so many years, Ling Han had naturally long since made some adjustments to the indestructible Heaven's Scroll so that the latter would correspond to the regulations in the Flaming Frost realm, but that was only in the aspect of physique. On the spiritual level, Ling Han still had not found the time to make adjustments, and it was only now, when he had become so passive due to the spiritual attacks, that he suddenly realized that he needed more improvement in this area. While Ling Han battled fiercely with Luo fuming, he continued to draw on regulations, adjusting the indestructible Heaven's Scroll, and strengthening himself in the aspect of his spirit. It should be known that Ling Han's opponent was a seventh heaven celestial king, a being who had grasped the means to deliver spiritual attacks. With him forced to multitask under such circumstances, his situation naturally worsened as he constantly wavered on the boundary of danger. But it was precisely this powerful feeling of crisis that forced out every single bit of potential from Ling Han. He discovered that the threshold on his cultivation level had loosened. The great doors to the fifth heaven were finally open to him. Furthermore, this was not the only piece of good news. He had also reached a new level in his grasp of the indestructible Heaven's Scroll, and was presently rapidly adapting himself to the regulations of the Flaming Frost realm. After all, he had already adjusted his physique previously, so the difficulty of adjusting himself on the spiritual level was naturally considerably lower. Come. Come. He erupted in loud laughter, bold and lofty. You are already close to death, and you still dare to be arrogant. Luo fuming sneered. This brat was really preposterous. He had already sustained several thousand spiritual attacks from him, and his spiritual attack was naturally injured heavily, and he actually still dared to laugh wildly? Ling Han ignored him completely. If Luo fuming had not grasped the means to inflict spiritual damage, Ling Han would have been able to kill the former with a few blows. Now, Ling Han naturally would not take Luo fuming seriously, either. The other party was only a puppet that was being influenced by the black qi. Come. Ling Han shouted at the skies. Come what? Luo fuming was just about to continue mocking when a feeling of anxiety suddenly rose up inside his heart. He raised his head, and could see dark clouds spreading out. Terrifying lightning bolts were flashing within. Fuck, it was a heavenly tribulation that was coming. Chapter 26:13, Breaking Through to the Fifth Heaven. Chapter 26:13, Breaking Through to the Fifth Heaven. Thunderclouds rolled out, and the heavenly tribulation was about to arrive. Lightning flashed within the thunderclouds, exuding a frightening aura that would strike fear even into the heart of a seventh heaven celestial king. Luo fuming paled in shock. Ling Han was actually going to undergo a tribulation at this moment. This young man's strength was extremely powerful. As a fourth heaven king tier, he was capable of matching seventh heaven, and now he was going to undergo the great tribulation of the fifth heaven. Would the might of the tribulation be comparable to the eighth heaven? Clang! The first bolt of divine lightning had already descended. Ling Han was unafraid, and charged forwards with his fists raised. Lightning struck his iron fists, and the regulations of lightning exploded, creating boundless flashes of lightning, as if an ocean of lightning had been spilt. It was extremely terrifying. Dumbfounded, Luo fuming was watching in shock. Though he knew that Ling Han was very strong, the fact that the latter was strong to this extent still struck him dumb with astonishment. He could not believe it. That was because Luo fuming knew that it might be that he himself could bear this kind of tribulation, but he would definitely have to pay a massive price for doing so. Even if he was not severely injured, he definitely couldn't take the second blow and be completely unscathed a second time. But would a tribulation have only a single strike? It would barrage one for a whole day. Indeed, Luo fuming had cultivated a secret technique, so his battle prowess had soared greatly, but that was when his target was other beings. If one used spiritual attacks on a tribulation, would the tribulation slow down even for the slightest instant? Hence, when faced with a heavenly tribulation, he was actually still the original seventh heaven Luo fuming, without the slightest improvement. This kind of might from the heaven and earth made him tremble. Even if he was a celestial king, and was the same level as regulations. How could he dare to make another move? To say nothing of whether the might of the tribulation would be magnified due to his cultivation level after he was pulled into the tribulation, even if it was exactly the same, his only fate would definitely still be death. How is this brat so freakish? He mumbled, his expression extremely ugly. And in the surroundings, everyone was similarly popping their eyes out in shock. Heavens, what have I seen? A fourth heaven celestial king is actually capable of matching a seventh heaven great elite. Moreover, he is even breaking through in the midst of battle. The might of this tribulation is too terrifying, isn't it? Why does it give me the feeling of a ninth heaven tribulation? In the thunderclouds, Ling Han was battling the tribulation intensely. To him, a tribulation was not hard to undergo. Thus, he drew the divine demon sword, and being tempered by the tribulation, he drew this terrifying lightning into the body of his sword. It could allow the divine demon sword to gain the power of lightning, and it was possible that the divine demon sword would be able to unleash the might of eighth heaven. This naturally was extremely difficult. How could the power of heaven and earth be stolen? Yet Ling Han was unconcerned. He was going to undergo a heavenly tribulation anyways, so even if there was just a single bit of benefit, that would still be pure profit. Crack, crack, crack. The heavenly tribulation struck down endlessly, every single lightning bolt seemingly capable of crushing Ling Han into dust, but in truth, it was all unsuccessful attempts. Luo fuming hesitated. Should he stay here and continue to wait until Ling Han had finished undergoing his heavenly tribulation, or should he leave immediately? Leave. He was not satisfied with that. The enemy who had killed his son was right in front of him, and he previously had also gotten the absolute upper hand in terms of battle prowess. But if he didn't, what if Ling Han finished undergoing the heavenly tribulation, and his battle prowess spiked, so he turned the tables to kill Luo fuming instead? Hence, Luo fuming was very hesitant, conflicted between two difficult choices. After hesitating for a very long time, his expression finally became determined. He had decided to stay. Firstly, Luo fuming wanted to avenge his son, and secondly, Ling Han definitely had to be hiding some extremely great secret. Otherwise, there was no way he could be so strong. Luo fuming was determined to snatch this secret for himself. If this had been before he'd entered into the ancient tomb, perhaps he would have chosen evasion as his best option. While strength was indeed great, his life was clearly more important. But now, he was affected by the black chi, and his greed could no longer be contained. Moreover, he had absolute belief in the might of the spiritual attack, and thought that once he used this move, Ling Han would definitely end up like how he had previously pummeled heavily and mercilessly. He sat quietly on the sidelines, recovering to his strongest condition. At the same time, he was also building power up for his strongest attack. Now, he completely had the initiative. Attack was only the matter of a single thought for him. He had more than enough time to prepare for a powerful move. His strongest move was the 3 evil bone needles. He would need to prepare for more than 10 breaths' time just to shoot out a single needle. In a battle of equal power, what time would he have to prepare for this attack? But now, not only could he shoot out the evil bone needle, he could even shoot out all 3 of them. Luo fuming couldn't help but show a hint of pity in his expression. He had obtained these 3 evil bone needles in an ancient site before he had entered the Celestial King graveyard. They were extremely valuable, and had astonishing destructive power. He had also used them to assassinate several celestial kings whose cultivation level surpassed his, but every time he used them, a few more cracks would appear on the evil bone needles. He would probably only be able to use them one last time. This pity only flashed past on his face, and Luo fuming quickly steadied his resolve. As long as he killed Ling Han, what he would gain would far surpass the value of 3 evil bone needles. To speak of nothing else, merely the celestial tool that this brat had was worth the sacrifice. Time passed quietly, and a day's time was just about to be over. Luo fuming suddenly stood up. He raised his head to look. The tribulation clouds were dense, but no lightning was unleashed. Taking into account the factor of time, they were clearly building up for the final, as well as the strongest, blow. He set his eyes on Ling Han, his divine sense also locking down on the latter solidly. Once the last strike from the heavenly tribulation descended, Luo fuming would also quickly follow up by shooting the 3 evil bone needles. In these circumstances, he really could not believe that Ling Han could still survive this safely. Clang! The last bolt of lightning from the heavenly tribulation descended. It was extremely grand, as if a lightning dragon had taken form, roaring towards Ling Han. At the same time, Luo fuming also waved his right hand. Xiao, 3 evil bone needles were shot out. And that was not all, either. Luo fuming was waiting. Once the heavenly tribulation struck down on Ling Han, Luo fuming would deliver a spiritual attack. Otherwise, even if he interfered in the heavenly tribulation, nothing good would definitely happen to him. Ling Han smirked coldly. Luo fuming had been waiting all this while at the sidelines, so how could Ling Han be unable to think that the other party was planning to snipe him after the heavenly tribulation? Ling Han flicked the divine demon sword, meeting that final lightning bolt from the heavenly tribulation. Then, he stretched out his left hand, and pressed down on the 3 evil bone needles. Regulations of time flared, and the 3 evil bone needles instantly slowed down drastically. A shadowy light dimmed and brightened, as if they wanted to pierce through the chains that the regulations of time ensnared them with. Luo fuming was stunned. The evil bone needles were terrifyingly powerful. When he himself had been a 2nd heaven celestial king, he had used them to assassinate a 3rd heaven celestial king. This was definitely a precious tool that had been forged by a 9th heaven celestial king. Aside from 9th heaven celestial king tier, they should not be affected by regulations of any other level. Yet Ling Han actually made the evil bone needles stop. Just how inconceivable was this? This guy had only just advanced to the 5th heaven. Was he really that terrifying? However, Luo fuming was only taken aback for an instant. Immediately, he delivered a spiritual attack against Ling Han. It surpassed regulations, or was another kind of regulations. It had no concept of distance at all. The moment it was delivered, the attack instantly blasted into Ling Han's mind. A hint of self-satisfaction appeared on Luo fuming's face. Ling Han would definitely lose his control over regulations due to the effects of this blow, and even if it was just an instant, the evil bone needle would be able to stab towards Ling Han again. Furthermore, it could not possibly be blocked this time. Die. Xiao, the spiritual attack had already landed, but what shocked Luo fuming was the fact that the 3 evil bone needles were actually still motionless. How is this possible? Luo fuming could not accept this at all. This scene had completely overturned his common sense. Ling Han grinned proudly. It was not something as simple as a breakthrough that he had done. He had also completed the spirit cultivation part of the indestructible Heaven's Scroll. This kind of spiritual attack was indeed still capable of affecting him, but when used by Luo fuming, it was actually not much different than if it was used by that large gorilla and old woman from before. It would only cause Ling Han a slight stinging sensation for a while. This was completely within the range he could tolerate. Chapter 26:14, Smacked to Death with a Single Strike. Chapter 26:14, Smacked to Death with a Single Strike. After faltering for a brief moment, Luo fuming suddenly turned around to flee. Even his spiritual attacks couldn't affect Ling Han, so how could he possibly hope to rival the latter? When at the third heaven, Ling Han had already been capable of rivaling Luo fuming with the help of his divine demon sword. Now that Ling Han had advanced 2 levels compared to back then, how could Luo fuming have even a sliver of a chance? Not only did he have no chance at victory, but he even faced the risk of death. He was bloodthirsty, and he was greedy. However, in the face of certain defeat and death, he naturally wouldn't be as foolish as to charge forward with no regard for anything else. Ling Han shook his head, saying, "It's too late." He reached over to grab at Luo fuming. Boom! Like a lofty mountain, the regulations transformed into a corporeal hand that completely blocked all paths of retreat for Luo fuming. No! There was shock and disbelief on Luo fuming's face, and there was more so a sense of regret and resentment. Why hadn't he fled earlier? Why had he cornered himself into such a deadly situation? He wasn't that kind of person. A strong sense of confusion overtook Luo fuming. He had always been a cautious person who refused to do anything he wasn't certain about. However, Ling Han had already been able to rival him while at the third heaven, and this was the case even though Luo fuming had mastered powerful spiritual secret techniques. Now that Ling Han had surpassed the fourth heaven and entered the fifth heaven, why had Luo fuming still dared to target the former? Why had he still been led astray by his greed? Even up until this moment, he still couldn't understand what it was that had affected him. His actions were in complete contrast to his usual behavior. Ling Han's palm smashed down. Pa! Luo fuming was instantly crushed to death. Once his spiritual attacks failed to affect his opponent, Luo fuming would be weaker than even the Yin River Celestial King. Meanwhile, Ling Han had already been able to kill the Yin River Celestial King while at the fourth heaven, so now that he had advanced to the fifth heaven, wouldn't killing Luo fuming be as easy as the flick of a wrist? The surrounding celestial kings were all stunned upon seeing this. They couldn't help but tremble in apprehension. This fifth heaven celestial king was far too ferocious. He had managed to kill a seventh heaven celestial king with a single smack. His strength could already rival the eighth heaven, right? However, Ling Han simply shook his head. Following the rise in his cultivation level, he discovered that it became increasingly difficult to kill those who were at a higher cultivation level than him. Luo fuming had only been an emperor tier, and if it weren't for this unique environment, it would have been impossible for him to reach the seventh heaven in the first place. Moreover, this kind of seventh heaven was as weak as could be. It was because of this that Ling Han had managed to kill him with ease with a single smask. However, what if he were a seventh heaven monarch tier? In that case, killing him would have been far more difficult. If others knew of his thoughts, they would definitely berate him for being greedy. He had already killed an enemy 2 levels above him, and this was already a heaven-defying feat, yet he was still disappointed and sighing that this wasn't good enough. Ling Han flicked through Luo fuming's spatial celestial tools. However, there were only a few hundred ascending dragon pills inside them. This was naturally far inferior to the Azure Ghost Celestial King's wealth. However, this couldn't be helped. After all, Luo fuming was only a seventh heaven celestial king. Ling Han sat down cross-legged, holding the dimension scroll in his hands. Now that the upper limit of his cultivation had been unlocked, he could naturally elevate the level of his body art again. He didn't know what other dangers lay in the ancient tomb, but he knew there would definitely be more challenges ahead. Otherwise, those ninth heaven celestial kings would have already obtained the remaining scrolls of the 9 transformations divine scroll and retreated from this place long ago. It was naturally good to increase his strength. Moreover, this wouldn't take much time anyway. Even so, Ling Han immediately fell silent after sitting down. In the blink of an eye, 17 years passed. During this time, some other celestial kings charged into the ancient tomb, unable to suppress their greed and lusting after some treasures. Many other celestial kings engaged in deadly battles outside, with their corpses littering the ground before the ancient tomb. Some other celestial kings also arrived and displayed their domineering might. However, no one stepped forward to disturb Ling Han. This was because his act of killing Luo Fuming with a single strike was still a hotly discussed topic among the others. Even though the newcomers were skeptical of this, they still decided not to provoke Ling Han, since there wasn't any real need to. After all, what if the rumors were true? However, there were always arrogant and cocksure people. What *T are you spewing? A fifth heaven celestial king killing a seventh heaven celestial king? How can such a preposterous thing occur? A woman said in a silvery voice. She was extremely beautiful, yet her delicate face was filled with arrogance. Exactly. Why don't they claim that he killed a 9-heaven celestial king? Someone beside her said in agreement. This was a group of youths who appeared as profligate as could be. There were 9 people in total, 6 men and 3 women. Their strength was very similar, and they were mostly all at the 5th heaven. 2 of them were at the 6th heaven, 1 male and 1 female, and they were both wearing an aura of arrogance. Young Master Shu is a monarch tier 1 in a trillion years, yet even he can only guarantee victory against those at the same cultivation level, a man in black said as he pointed his thumb at the man who was at the 7th heaven. Yet, they're claiming that this person managed to slay a 7th heaven celestial king while at the 5th heaven? Then what does that make of young Master Shu? And Sister Qing? She's also a 6th heaven monarch tier, and she's destined to become a peerless 9th heaven empress in the future, another woman added. The man and woman who were praised both wore modest smiles. However, their expressions were as arrogant as could be, and it was clear that they completely agreed with these words of praise. They felt like they were indeed this powerful. A youth in purple strode forward, and said, "Who is that person? Come on out. I, Liu Yuheng, want to see what kind of 3-headed and 6-armed beast you are." He swept his gaze around, peering down at those in the surroundings. "What a haughty person," someone mumbled. "Shush. Hold your tongue. Don't you recognize these people?" His companion hurriedly said in warning. "Are they that impressive?" the other person asked in puzzlement. "They're young masters from Heaven Transforming City," his companion replied. Gasp. "The Heaven Transforming City," the person exclaimed in astonishment. According to rumors, that place was founded by the first batch of celestial kings who were tossed into the Celestial King Graveyard. It's also the first city of the Celestial King Graveyard. His companion nodded, saying, "That's right. The Heaven Transforming City is brimming with elites, and there are more than 109th Heaven Celestial Kings in that place. Moreover, the first batch of Celestial Kings who were locked into the Celestial King Graveyard are all genuine elites. Which one of them doesn't have a terrifying background? Which one of them isn't supremely talented? To say nothing of them, even their descendants are extremely powerful and talented. It's rumored that many of them are monarch tiers." "Monarch tiers," the first person exclaimed with a gasp. Even in the Flaming Frost realm, monarch tiers were few and far in between. Even though their voices were low, he could still hear them as clear as day. Their words caused him to feel incredibly smug. Their identity as members of Heaven Transforming City was extremely beneficial. He scoffed, and said, "Sure enough, this person is full of hot air. After seeing me, you don't even dare to step forward. Haha." He pointed to a random person, saying, "You, tell me where that so-called freak is." The person he pointed to naturally didn't want to offend Ling Han. However, he had never witnessed Ling Han's might with his own eyes, and he had only heard about it from other people's descriptions. As such, he felt more threatened by these young masters from Heaven Transforming City. After hesitating for a brief moment, he pointed at Ling Han. Liu Yuheng looked over, only to see a person sitting cross-legged far in the distance. The space surrounding him was clear, and it was as if he were the moon being highlighted by the stars, and as if he were an emperor sitting before his subjects. It was as if his paramount might destined him to solitude. Chapter 26:15, Stomped to Death. Chapter 26:15, Stomped to Death. As he looked at Ling Han, Liu Yuheng couldn't help but feel like a tiny ant. It was as if he weren't facing a fifth heaven celestial king, but a paramount ninth heaven celestial king instead. He hurriedly shook his head. He had come here to teach that person a lesson, to show everyone that it was preposterous to believe that a fifth heaven celestial king could kill a seventh heaven celestial king. After all, how could that be possible? Yet, he had actually been frightened by this person. How embarrassing. Yuheng, why are you standing there like a fool? Perhaps you're afraid, a person behind him said with a chuckle. This person was Liu Yuheng's companion, and he had discovered Liu Yuheng's minuscule change in expression. Liu Yuheng instantly flared up in rage, shouting, "Why would I be afraid?" He glared at Ling Han, and shouted, "Brat! You still dare to remain seated after seeing me? Have you grown tired of living?" Even though Ling Han had been extracting energy from the dimension scroll this entire time, he wasn't actually in a state of seclusion. Instead, he could stop whenever he wanted. It was just that he didn't want to stop. He swept his gaze over Liu Yuheng before saying impatiently, "Piss off." Ha 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 ha. Ling Han's reply drew a round of laughs from Liu Yuheng's companions. "Liu Yuheng, this person doesn't think much of you. You've seriously embarrassed yourself. You were actually berated by some random nobody." They joked and laughed, and this caused Liu Yuheng's expression to become increasingly dark. Initially, he had only planned to teach Ling Han a lesson. Now that he was being taunted by his companions, a burst of killing intent instantly flared up in his heart. "You're truly seeking death." He resolutely lashed out, with his hands summoning the great Tao of Earth and forming hundreds of meteors that viciously crashed down on Ling Han. "Liu Yuheng is growing more and more powerful," the man at the sixth heaven said. He was called Shu Huan, and he enjoyed the highest status out of the 9 people. His words carried a sense of critique, and it was clear that he viewed himself as superior to Liu Yuheng. This myriad starstorm technique is Lord Liu Zun's trump card. Even though Liu Yuheng can't even replicate 1/10,000th of its true might, it's still an extraordinary technique among those at the 5th heaven, the woman at the 6th heaven remarked. She was called Zhao Qing, and her background was similar to that of Shu Huan. However, her cultivation was slightly inferior. "Hehe, it looks like Liu Yuheng is truly enraged," someone said with a chuckle. "Who told you guys to provoke him?" a young woman scolded. Many of the men shook their heads, and said, "Well, that brat was seeking death anyway, so he can't really blame anyone." They had only just entered this area, so they still hadn't been affected by the black energy yet. However, as descendants of the elites from Heaven Transforming City, they naturally didn't attach much value to human life. So what if this person was killed? Who told him to be so unlucky? Boom. Several hundred meteors crashed down, with each being as powerful as the full power strike of a first heaven emperor tier. This was naturally terrifying, and the surroundings were instantly obliterated and flattened. Dust and rocks flew into the air, forming a gigantic mushroom cloud. He was killed just like that. With the rumors praising him to the heavens, I thought that he would at least be more powerful than this. Who knew that he was actually this weak? Heh, who the hell made up that rumor? Shu Huan and the others viewed Ling Han with utmost disdain. In fact, even the surrounding cultivators felt like they had been lied to. What kind of elite was this? He was as weak as an ant. "Utter trash," Liu Yuheng said softly as he clasped his hands behind his back. However, his words reverberated around everyone's ears. He was acting with arrogance and haughtiness. However, who told him to be so powerful? "Whom are you calling utter trash?" a crisp and clear voice said from amid the dust and rocks. Everyone looked over, only to see a young man striding forward, with the chaotic regulations unable to near him at all. This person was naturally Ling Han. What? Impossible. Good Lord. All their eyes widened in disbelief upon seeing Ling Han stride forward in a carefree and casual manner. Even Shu Huan and Zhao Qing were slightly astonished by this. As sixth heaven celestial kings, they could naturally achieve this as well. However, Ling Han was only at the 5th heaven, Liu Yuheng faltered for a moment before descending into rage again. You merely blocked a single strike of mine. Is that anything to be proud of? He was fearless at this moment. After all, he still had Zhao Qing and Xu Huan, two powerful elites. Moreover, he still had heaven-transforming city, a colossal beast in this realm. Thus, what could a measly fifth heaven celestial king do to him? He lashed out again, drawing on the great Tao of earth as he made a grabbing motion. A fearsome halberd materialized in the air, and viciously thrust forward at Ling Han. Ling Han's eyes became ice-cold. Even though he was aware that he was a magnet for trouble, he was truly innocent this time. He had been sitting there and meditating, so whom had he provoked? Right now, he was already at the fifth heaven. With his body art, power of regulations, and divine demon sword, it was entirely possible that his battle prowess could rival those at the eighth heaven. Even if facing those at the ninth heaven, he could still run away with ease and composure. Thus, did he still need to be afraid of anyone in this celestial king graveyard? If he didn't display his supreme prowess, were they all going to take him for a weakling? Ling Han unleashed a punch. Peng! The halberd instantly shattered into pieces, transforming into countless shards of regulations that shot into the surroundings. Pa, pa, pa. Several shards swept past Liu Yuheng's face, instantly leaving several gashes. Blood flowed down his cheeks. Ling Han pressed his advantage, charging forward and throwing a strike at Liu Yuheng. Liu Yuheng was astounded. He tried to dodge, yet how could he possibly escape from Ling Han's grasp as a measly fifth heaven emperor tier? After all, he was no Ji Wuming or Xiaoing Xiong. Peng! Liu Yuheng was smacked to the ground by Ling Han. He tried to crawl up, but his head was immediately pressed to the ground by Ling Han's foot. This foot was as heavy as the stars, and it rendered him completely immobile. He was both infuriated and humiliated. As the son of heaven-transforming city's supreme elite Liu Zun, when had he ever suffered such misery before? However, those who had witnessed Ling Han disposing of Luo fuming before simply watched on with cold smiles. This person had already killed a seventh heaven celestial king with ease, so what trouble could a measly fifth heaven celestial king pose? They had already warned him about Ling Han's strength, yet he had still insisted on charging forward to get his face smacked. Was he not asking for a beating? However, many more people had only heard rumors about Ling Han's strength before. Now that they were witnessing it with their own eyes, they couldn't help but gasp and feel astounded. Xu Huan looked up, with rage spreading across his face. However, he quickly suppressed his rage, and said calmly, "Release him. Then sever one arm and one leg. If you do so, I can forgive you. Did you hear? Hurry up and release him," another person immediately shouted. Young Master Xu doesn't always act so nicely. Don't miss this opportunity. Humph. Do you know who we are? Ling Han faltered upon hearing this. These people were far too arrogant. He looked at Xu Huan with a faint smile, and said, "Are you commanding me? Release him. Don't force me into action." Xu Huan replied calmly. Even though he had witnessed Ling Han's strength, he was still extremely confident in his own abilities. "Young Master Xu, kill him. Kill this bastard." Liu Yuheng shouted. "This person actually dared to humiliate me. I want him dead." Ling Han slowly raised his foot. Upon seeing this, everyone thought that Ling Han had chosen to yield. They all shook their heads. This can't be helped. After all, these are people from heaven-transforming city. That place is filled with ancient elites, and it's said that each of them is powerful enough to massacre an entire city. If those people are offended, which force can withstand their rage? Even though the Desolate Moon Alliance, 10,000 Dragons Alliance, and Seasons Alliance are brimming with elites and power, Heaven-transforming city is definitely no weaker than any one of them. This is the smart choice. Fuck. Just as everyone was engaged in a spirited discussion, they suddenly saw Ling Han stomp down without any hesitation at all. Pa. Liu Yuheng's head instantly cracked open like a smashed watermelon. Chapter 26:16 Soul Extinguishing Drum. Chapter 26:16 Soul Extinguishing Drum. Silence instantly enveloped the surroundings. No one could speak a single word. Everyone thought that Ling Han had yielded, not daring to provoke heaven-transforming city. In any case, this would have been the smartest choice. Heaven-transforming city was far too powerful. They were the oldest force in the Celestial King Graveyard, and they were founded by the earliest members of the Celestial King Graveyard. At that time, all of the Celestial Kings had possessed immense backgrounds so profound that they couldn't be executed. At the same time, they also possessed terrifying strength and talent themselves. It was rumored that they were all monarch stars. Thus, just Heaven-transforming city alone could rival the Desolate Moon Alliance, the 10,000 Dragons Alliance, and the Seasons Alliance. Ling Han had brought calamity upon himself. His dead meat. Who would have thought? Is actually this vicious. Vicious Maya *s. That's nothing but recklessness. His seeking death. Some admired Ling Han's indomitable spirit, while others shook their heads in pity. A fifth heaven celestial king yearning to challenge heaven-transforming city? Death couldn't befall him fast enough. Meanwhile, Shu Huan and the others all wore ice-cold expressions. They were filled with rage. Ling Han actually dared to kill their companion before them? Damn it. Shu Huan laughed with fury. Very well. Very well. I've never come across such a haughty person before. You've truly opened my eyes. Boom. He unleashed his aura, summoning numerous dragons that bellowed in the surroundings. In fact, the roars of these dragons could directly shock fifth heaven celestial kings unconscious. Boom. He strode forward, instantly causing the earth to quake. He was a sixth heaven monarch tier, with his vitality index reaching an impressive 11,000. This was a level that could almost rival ordinary seventh heaven celestial kings. However, how could there be other sixth heaven celestial kings present? All of them had already entered the ancient tomb to search for treasures. Thus, Shu Huan's aura instantly knocked many of the nearby cultivators unconscious. Those slightly further away also swayed and stumbled, and it was as if they were all drunk. One had to realize that these people were all celestial kings. This was proof of Shu Huan's immense power. Now that young Master Shu has stepped forward, this arrogant brat is definitely going to die. Humph. He actually dared to provoke heaven-transforming city? Does he not know the meaning of death? We can't kill him just like that. We have to extract his soul and burn it with the myriad refining cauldron for tens of thousands of years. We have to subject him to a slow and painful death and force him to regret his decision to provoke heaven-transforming city. Zhao Qing and the others spoke with anger behind Shu Huan. They weren't infuriated because of Liu Yuheng's death, but they were instead infuriated because Ling Han had dared to challenge the dignity and might of heaven-transforming city. You must die, Shu Huan said. He strode toward Ling Han, with each step powerful enough to shake heaven and earth. He was a monarch tier, someone whose mastery of the great Tao was far superior to that of ordinary celestial kings. The spectators were all stunned. Just then, they had still been fully confident in Ling Han's abilities. Upon witnessing Shu Huan's astonishing aura, however, they couldn't help but waver. Perhaps, this person was even more powerful. Ling Han remained unfazed and unmoving. Regardless of how the tsunami-like waves of aura surged over, he remained still like a colossal mountain that soared to the heavens. What did it matter that a tsunami was crashing over? If it struck him, he would simply send it back to where it had come from. Capture him. Shu Huan finally lashed out, reaching out with his right hand. Boom. The regulations condensed, transforming into gigantic azure pythons that radiated with strength and might as they swooped down on Ling Han. Zhao Qing and the others sneered. Even if Ling Han were at the sixth heaven, he would still be easily captured by this technique. After all, Shu Huan was a monarch tier. Pa. Just as everyone thought that Ling Han was facing inevitable defeat, they saw him stride forward and swing his hand, slapping Shu Huan across the face. Shu Huan directly flew into the air, opening his mouth and spitting out blood and teeth. Everything appeared simple and easy, like an adult bullying a child. Silence enveloped them again. No one could speak. This was far too powerful. Even a sixth heaven celestial king couldn't withstand a single strike, and he was sent flying with a single slap. Just how colossal was the gulf between them? Zhao Qing and the others had still been sneering a moment ago, yet at this instant, their sneers froze on their faces. All that remained was a sense of numbness and fear. This man. Just what kind of freak was he? Peng. Shu Huan crashed to the ground, with his originally white robes now tattered and covered in dust. He appeared as disheveled as could be. He crawled up, his eyes filled with fury, humiliation, and terror. In just a single strike, his chin had almost been smashed into smithereens. Not only had he lost several teeth, but even his jaw had been completely shattered. As a sixth heaven celestial king, he had actually failed to withstand even a single strike. He was unwilling to accept this. He was unwilling to believe this. Shu Huan shook his right hand, retrieving an extremely small drum, one that was only the size of his palm. It was bright red, and it was as if it were dripping with blood. There were more so wisps of black air rising from it, transforming into countless tortured souls. Ah, my head hurts like hell. It's as if there's a ghost wailing in my mind. Same here. Everyone clasped their head. Some had blood dripping from their eyes, while others had blood seeping from their ears or nose. Many more of them were bleeding from all orifices, resulting in a bloody and terrifying scene. They were all celestial kings. Regardless of how weak they were, they had all reached the level of regulations. Yet, they were actually bleeding because of this small drum. This is Lord Shu's soul-extinguishing drum, Zhao Qing exclaimed. Who would have thought? Lord Shu actually bestowed his soul-extinguishing drum on young Master Shu. Chapter 26:17, Slain with a Single Cut. Chapter 26:17, Slain with a Single Cut. Describing this was time-consuming, but in reality, it only took Shu Huan an instant to summon these 81 seventh heaven evil spirits that were bellowing at Ling Han. This was a petrifying scene. This was a whopping 81 evil spirits. This was enough to send those at the early stage of the 8th heaven into retreat. Everyone shook their head. The conclusion was already foregone. Regardless of how powerful Ling Han was, there was simply no way that he could reach the 8th heaven. Thus, his only fate was to be devoured by these evil spirits. This was the might of a celestial tool. Ha ha ha. Before a celestial tool, how are you going to turn the tables? Shu Huan said with arrogance. This was the source of his confidence. Kneel down and accept death. That way, I can consider granting you a swift death. Ling Han shook his head, saying, I merely wanted to observe the might of your celestial tool. You truly think that I can't defeat you? You're already staring at death, yet you still dare to act with such arrogance. Shu Huan scoffed. Hurry up and kneel. Zhao Qing and the others heckled. Right now, they were standing in a position of absolute advantage. You people are nothing but frogs in a well, Ling Han said faintly. Whoosh. The divine demon's sword flashed into existence. A cold gleam immediately cut through the air. Pa, 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 pa. All of the evil spirits were immediately slashed into two. However, Shu Huan wasn't fazed in the least. These evil spirits didn't have a physical body, and they were instead the divine senses of those that the celestial tool had killed. They were trapped in the soul-extinguishing drum for eternity. Thus, it mattered little that they were cleft in half, since they could immediately knit together again. Your struggle is futile, he sneered in disdain. However, in the next instant, his eyes almost popped out of his head. This was because even though the evil spirits squirmed in a struggle to knit back together, they couldn't do so no matter what. All they could do was squirm around in vain. How is this possible? The attack of the celestial tool is this flimsy? What he didn't know was that Ling Han's divine demon sword was also a celestial tool. Moreover, it was a celestial tool that had engulfed a huge amount of divine metal. Even though it still had yet to become a heavenly venerate tool, it was at least far more powerful than ordinary divine metal. While facing heavenly tribulation before, Ling Han had funneled the power of the lightning tribulation into his sword. Even though the latter hadn't been able to absorb much of this power, being tempered by an 8th heaven heavenly tribulation had still raised its might by a significant amount. The might of this slash could rival the attacks of 8th heaven celestial kings. Ling Han's power was at an absolute advantage, so with the sharpness and destructiveness of the divine demon sword, he was naturally able to cut the evil spirits in two. Moreover, they were unable to knit back together no matter what. If it couldn't achieve even this, wouldn't the divine demon's sword be nothing more than an ordinary celestial tool? Everyone was rendered speechless with shock. The drum in Shu Huan's hand was a celestial tool. Moreover, it was one that had been personally forged by a ninth heaven celestial king. Even though it hadn't unleashed its full might, it had still summoned 81 seventh heaven evil spirits, enough to terrify even 8th heaven celestial king. Yet, Ling Han had disposed of them with a single slash. Peng. How is he so powerful? How can he possibly be so powerful? Ling Han lowered his sword. He then looked at Shu Huan, and asked, "Do you have any more trump cards?" Shu Huan's expression changed again and again. He was truly unable to accept Ling Han's arrogance. However, what could he do? Even his celestial tool had failed to suppress Ling Han. He had no option but to call his father for help. However, it was a pity that his father had already entered the ancient tomb long ago. Thus, how could distant water save a nearby fire? You got me this time. Shu Huan was someone who was able to swallow his pride. He forcefully suppressed his rage, and turned around to leave. When he regrouped with his father, he would ask him to deal with this brat. "Who allowed you to leave?" Ling Han said calmly. "You still want me to stay?" Shu Huan retorted in a haughty voice. His father was none other than Shu Fang. Not only was he a ninth heaven celestial king, but he was more so a monarch star. He was powerful enough to flatten any city in the celestial king graveyard. Moreover, the Shu clan still had the support of a second-tier heavenly venerate. Ling Han shook his head, saying, "If that's all, then you can die now." He unleashed a punch at Shu Huan. Just then, Ling Han hadn't attacked, because he had wanted to see what other trump cards Shu Huan had. However, since the latter had nothing else, there was naturally no need for Ling Han to hold back anymore. "What? You actually dare to target me?" Shu Huan was both astonished and enraged. Did Ling Han not know who he was? He hurriedly struck the soul-extinguishing drum again, summoning evil spirit after evil spirit. As long as he had energy, he could continue to summon evil spirits to support him. Peng. However, the evil spirits were immediately obliterated by Ling Han's punch. Right now, Ling Han's battle prowess could already rival that of 8th heaven celestial kings, so how could measly 7th heaven evil spirits withstand the might of his fist? Shu Huan hurriedly retreated as he continued to strike the soul-extinguishing drum. However, even though he had the help of a celestial tool, unleashing 7th heaven attacks while at the 6th heaven was still extremely taxing, so much so that he wanted to vomit blood. If this continued, even if Ling Han didn't kill him, he would still die from exhaustion. He couldn't help but roar, "Do you know who I am? I'm the son of Shu Fang. My father is a 9th heaven monarch star, and is powerful enough to flatten a city by himself. My ancestor is more so a second-tier heavenly venerate. If you dare to kill me, my father definitely won't forgive you. Moreover, even if you manage to flee from the celestial king graveyard, my ancestor will still be able to sense your aura. Even if you flee to the ends of the world, you still won't be able to escape death. Second-tier heavenly venerate. This was truly a transcendent existence. Indeed, they could guarantee a first-tier heavenly venerate battle prowess regardless of which dimension they went to. However, Ling Han didn't stop. His path was filled with obstacles to overcome, and his Tao was one that surged forward with courage. If he shirked because of his fear of a second-tier heavenly venerate, his accomplishments would only be so. His principles were extremely simple. If others didn't provoke him, then he wouldn't provoke others. If others provoked him, however, he would repay them with 100 times the fury. Shu Huan continued to vomit blood. He was truly striking the soul-extinguishing drum as if his life depended on it. However, each evil spirit was destroyed in a flash, unable to linger around and group together with other evil spirits to trigger a qualitative change. However, if he didn't summon these evil spirits, he would be killed even sooner. Right now, his only option was to resist in vain. Even though he knew that he would eventually die from exhaustion, he still had no option but to commit to this tactic. "Attack him together," Zhao Qing immediately shouted. If this continued, Shu Huan would definitely be killed. However, the 6 other people shook in fear. With Shu Huan's strength, and with the help of a celestial tool, he was still utterly suppressed by Ling Han. Thus, what difference could they make? Did they have celestial tools? Were they at the 6th heaven? Sister Qing, we should hurry up and flee. That's right, staying alive is the most important. As long as we find the lords, we can definitely hurry back to save young Master Shu. They all shot back in retreat, not daring to seek death. Zhao Qing couldn't help but feel frustrated and angry. To say nothing of how difficult it would be to find Xu Fang and the others, even if they found them, how long would that take? At that time, perhaps grass would already be growing before Xu Huan's tombstone. This bunch of cowards. With a roar, she unsheathed her sword and charged at Ling Han. She wasn't just a friend of Xu Huan. Rather, she was his fiancée, and they had already become engaged long ago. Moreover, she was extremely satisfied with her fiancé, and she had extremely high hopes for him. Zhao Qing joined the battle, with her sword drawing down waves of fire. Ling Han turned around, and pointed a finger at Zhao Qing. Pu. The flames were instantly extinguished, and a small hole instantly appeared in Zhao Qing's chest. Her aura crashed down. Xiu. Seizing this opportunity, Xu Huan immediately turned around to flee, not caring about his fiancée at all. Xu Huan. Zhao Qing exclaimed in shock and disbelief. She hadn't imagined that her bravery would win her such betrayal. Ling Han shook his head, saying, "How pathetically shameless." His eyes were intense and ice-cold. Did Xu Huan truly think that he could escape? How naive. Chapter 26:18, Death of Xu Huan. Chapter 26:18, Death of Xu Huan. Ling Han strode forward, drawing on the regulations of space as he did so. Peng. Xu Huan was still fleeing, yet he immediately crashed into a wall, which sent him flying back. He was deeply astonished. With his strength as a 6th heaven celestial king, what wall wouldn't be shattered by him? Moreover, where in the world had this wall come from? Xu Huan focused his gaze, yet he was shocked to discover that this wall was actually Ling Han. I truly overestimated you. With such pathetic behavior, you still have the face to live. Ling Han said coldly. He immediately unleashed a strike at Xu Huan. No. Xu Huan immediately raised the soul-extinguishing drum to block this strike. This was a celestial tool, so even though he was unable to fully awaken it, it would still be impossible for Ling Han to shatter it with brute strength. Ling Han naturally wouldn't attack a celestial tool head-on. Even though Xu Huan couldn't unleash the full power of the celestial tool, if Ling Han dared to attack it head-on, that would be equivalent to triggering the celestial tool to awaken by itself. That would be an extremely foolish move. He retracted his fist at a lightning speed. Xu Huan was delighted upon seeing this. He had successfully evaded an attack. Afterward, he would immediately activate a movement technique and cause his speed to increase fourfold. At that time, Ling Han would be unable to catch him. In your dreams, Ling Han said in an ice-cold voice. Pa. Xu Huan heard the sound of bones snapping, after which an agonizing pain shot through his body. He immediately stumbled and collapsed to the ground. Half of his body felt numb and unresponsive. His pelvic bone had been shattered by Ling Han's kick. However, celestial kings were celestial kings, after all, so how could a broken bone stop them in their tracks? Xu Huan ignored the pain, with his strong desire to live urging him to use his hands to slam the ground. He instantly shot forward. At his level, there was no need to limit his attacks or movement techniques to just using his hands or feet, as one only needed their divine sense to channel the power of regulations. Xu Huan didn't dare to even glance at Ling Han. Right now, there was only a single thought in his mind to escape. I've already said this many times. If others don't provoke me, then I won't provoke them, Ling Han said calmly. If others provoke me, however, I'll repay them with 100 times the fury. Pu. When he finished saying this, he had already caught up to Xu Huan and unleashed a punch, blasting a huge hole into his back. You, actually, dared, Xu Huan said in a quivering voice. This punch had directly obliterated his heart, causing a severe wound. However, Even more fatal than this was Ling Han's martial intent that was causing chaos inside his body. Shu Huan's divine sense was nothing before this martial intent, and the demise of his mind was imminent. This was his doomsday. "My father will definitely kill you. Kill you," he bellowed. He then crashed to the ground, his eyes wide open. In this place, celestial kings were worth as much as dogs. What did it matter that he was a sixth heaven celestial king? What did it matter that he was the descendant of a heavenly venerate? Ling Han retracted his fist, and swept his gaze over the 7 remaining people. Pa, pa, pa. They all fell to their knees, trembling in terror. "Please don't kill me," they exclaimed as they kowtowed. Ling Han was unfazed, and he simply asked, "If I had been captured by you people, would you have let me live?" The answer was clearly no. He immediately lashed out. "Pa, pa, pa." How could fifth heaven celestial kings hope to block Ling Han's strikes? Their heads exploded one after another. In just a moment, Shu Huan and all 8 of his companions were killed. The surroundings were deathly silent. As the spectators gazed at Ling Han, it was as if they were gazing at a corpse. After all, those 9 people had all come from Heaven Transforming City, a city that was guarded by paramount 9th heaven celestial kings. Yet, Ling Han had killed their descendants just like that. Indeed, it would have been joyful to kill them. However, just how much trouble would this cause? Thus, even though Ling Han looked alive, he was, in fact, already a dead person. In this prison for celestial kings, no one could stop Shu Fang and the other paramount celestial kings from killing people regardless of who their opponent was. However, Ling Han paid absolutely no heed to this. Since he had already advanced to the 5th heaven, he was confident that he could escape from the grasp of 9th heaven celestial kings. Moreover, his strength was advancing each day and each hour, so when he reached the 6th heaven, it was very likely that he could even rival 9th heaven monarch tiers. In any case, he felt slightly at a loss as he stared at the soul-extinguishing drum. This was a celestial tool that contained a huge amount of divine metal. If he allowed the divine demon sword to engulf it, it would definitely take another step toward becoming a heavenly venerate tool. However, it was a shame that this celestial tool had been forged by a 9th heaven celestial king. In other words, this celestial tool would become even more ferocious when it didn't have a master. As such, even Ling Han didn't dare to touch it. Otherwise, he would have to face the might of a 9th heaven celestial king. Right now, he had no option but to flee if he came across such a powerful being. Forget about it. "I'll collect this celestial tool another day," Ling Han thought to himself. It could be said that he had set his sights on this celestial tool. He gazed toward the ancient tomb. Right now, at least 90% of the celestial king graveyard's 9th heaven celestial kings were inside this place. Perhaps not all of them, but at least 99% of them had most likely been affected by the black energy as well, causing them to become bloodthirsty and frenzied. If he entered, he would definitely face great peril. Even though he knew this, Ling Han was still extremely resolute as he strode toward the ancient tomb. He was far too curious. Just what in the world was Desolate Moon scheming? Ling Han made his way toward the ancient tomb, and it wasn't long before he disappeared into it. Inside the ancient tomb, Shu Fang was currently engaged in an intense battle with a black shadow. He wasn't alone, and there were several other 9th heaven celestial kings battling alongside him. Even so, they were still unable to gain an upper hand. This battle was abnormally difficult. If others saw this, they would definitely exclaim in disbelief. Just what kind of existence was this black shadow? It actually possessed such overwhelming power, even a team of several 9th heaven celestial kings was unable to suppress it. Looking closely, however, one would discover that this black shadow was actually confined to a small area. Because of this, it was clear that even though Shu Fang and the others couldn't win, they couldn't lose, either. However, this black shadow was far too quick, and it was impossible to make sense of what exactly it was. Was it a human or a beast? Or perhaps it was a precious tool or some other matter? At this critical moment, Shu Fang suddenly faltered. He was clearly the main force of the team, so his sudden falter naturally subjected his team to immense pressure. A celestial king was instantly struck and sent flying by the black shadow, with a gaping wound appearing on his chest. He had suffered a severe wound. "Hurry, retreat!" another ninth heaven celestial king immediately exclaimed. They hurriedly shot back in retreat. Because the black shadow was confined to a small area, it immediately turned around after pursuing them for a short distance. "Brother Shu, what's wrong?" the others asked as they turned to Shu Fang. Shu Fang wore an ice-cold expression as he replied, "My son was killed." "What?" the others exclaimed in deep shock. Who was so audacious? They actually dared to kill someone from Heaven Transforming City? Which audacious person was it? Was it the Desolate Moon Alliance or the Seasons Alliance? Or perhaps it was the 10,000 Dragons Alliance? They think that they can become enemies with Heaven Transforming City with an alliance of a few ninth heaven celestial kings? With a thought, Shu Fang made a grabbing motion at the void. He then said, "When I retrieve the soul extinguishing drum, I'll naturally know who the culprit is." The others were even more stunned upon hearing this. Shu Huan already had the soul extinguishing drum, yet he had still been killed. Even if nephew Huan was unable to unleash the full might of the soul extinguishing drum, he was still capable of reaching the early stage of the 8th heaven, right? That being the case, the culprit at least possesses a battle prowess at the early stage or middle stage of the 8th heaven. Far too many people meet this criterion in the Celestial King graveyard. It doesn't shrink the pool of people at all. However, no one in the younger generation is capable of killing nephew Huan. Thus, the culprit is definitely an old and experienced Celestial King. As they said this, a small blood-red drum had already shot over from the distance, landing in Shu Fang's hand. He sensed it slightly, and fury involuntarily spread across his face. "The person who killed my son was a 5th heaven Celestial King." Chapter 26:19 Jade Essence Pearl. Chapter 26:19 Jade Essence Pearl. A 5th heaven Celestial King. The other Celestial Kings faltered upon hearing this. How was this possible? After analyzing the events for half a day, even though all they spoke was nonsense, they confidently confirmed that the culprit was at least an 8th heaven Celestial King. Yet, a measly 5th heaven Celestial King? How could they possess such battle prowess? Was this not inconceivable? "Brother Shu, perhaps you saw incorrectly," a Celestial King said. He was a 9th heaven Celestial King, and he was also one of the first Celestial Kings to be locked in the Celestial King graveyard. However, because he was only a monarch tier, he was naturally weaker than Shu Shan. However, he also had the backing of a 2nd tier Heavenly Venerate, so he was in no way inferior in this aspect. Those who had been tossed into the Celestial King graveyard the earliest all had the backing of Heavenly Venerates. If others heard his comment, perhaps they would laugh themselves to death. After all, how could a 9 heaven Celestial King see incorrectly? However, the others didn't show any signs of laughing. In their eyes, Shu Fang's claim was indeed a complete impossibility. The only explanation was that Shu Fang had seen incorrectly. Shu Fang humphed upon hearing this. While he was also displeased with their doubt, he also understood that this was indeed unfathomable. He forcefully suppressed his displeasure before saying, "I saw very clearly through the soul-extinguishing drum. It was indeed a 5th heaven Celestial King who killed my son." He reiterated his point, and the others had no choice but to believe it. After all, would a 9th heaven Celestial King speak nonsense for no reason? However, what had the culprit relied on to become so powerful? A 5th heaven Celestial King killing a 6th heaven Celestial King. Moreover, nephew Huan was also a monarch tier. Even if we ignore the soul-extinguishing drum, the culprit's strength still definitely reached the 7th heaven. Otherwise, it would have been extremely easy for nephew Huan to escape, a 9th heaven Celestial King analyzed. A cultivation at the 5th heaven, yet a battle prowess at the 7th heaven. His evolution index is at least 11, another 9th heaven Celestial King remarked. Shu Fang's gaze was intense as he said in a calm voice, "Not only my son, but niece Zhao Qing, nephew Yuheng, and the others were also killed by that person." "What?" the other Celestial Kings exclaimed in shock. Counting the number of people in their group, it was a perfect 9. Moreover, They were coincidentally the parents of Shu Huan and the others. They were all followers of Shu Fang, so their children were naturally followers of Shu Huan as well. There was nothing wrong with this. Upon receiving the sudden news that their children had been killed, which of them could suppress their anger? Flames of fury erupted from their eyes, and they could barely stop themselves from charging out to search for the culprit straight away. Shu Fang hesitated for a moment before saying, "We've already reached a critical moment here, so we most certainly can't give up. Moreover, that culprit has already entered this realm, so we're better off completing this task before going after him. There's no need to abandon all of our previous efforts." Agreed. The Celestial Kings all nodded in agreement. In fact, several of them wanted to abandon this task to go after Ling Han straight away. However, since Shu Fang had already said this, it would be difficult for them to disagree. In any case, since Ling Han had also entered the ancient tomb, it would only be a matter of time before they crossed paths. "Here's wishing that when we meet him, he's still alive. We'll subject him to the most torturous pain in the world before ending his despicable life." Ling Han entered the ancient tomb. There were no gates to this tomb, and there was only an entrance that had been forcefully created by the Celestial Kings. However, this tomb did indeed house structures inside, and it wasn't just a single solid core. He continued to advance along the path that had also been forcefully carved out, and it wasn't long before this path intersected with the passageways inside the tomb. The walls of this passageway were embedded with pearls that were radiating with a warm glow. However, some had already been dug out and taken. These are Jade Essence Pearl. Ling Han was astonished upon seeing this. Jade Essence Pearls were a type of fruit that grew at the bottom of the ocean. When they ripened, they would automatically fall off the tree and become enveloped by the ice-cold energy at the bottom of the sea. After trillions upon trillions of years, they would then condense into pearls that could elevate the cultivation of Celestial Kings. Of course, the higher level a Celestial King was, the weaker the effects of the Jade Essence Pearl would be. In any case, however, they would still have some positive effects. Now, however, these pearls were actually being used as lights in an unbelievably extravagant manner. Moreover, they were being used for a dead person. This was truly an astonishing sight. Jade Essence Pearls were incredibly rare, so even obtaining a single pearl could be seen as extremely lucky. Now, however, Ling Han could see at least several dozen in this stretch of the passageway. Ling Han reached over to grab one, unleashing his phenomenal power as he did so. However, the Jade Essence Pearls didn't budge a single inch. Ling Han refused to accept this, so he immediately retrieved his Divine Demon Sword and used its tip to dig into the walls. With the toughness of the Divine Demon Sword, all Ling Han heard was a crack before a Jade Essence Pearl fell into his hands. No wonder some Jade Essence Pearls had been dug out, while others had been left alone. It wasn't that people didn't want them, but rather that they couldn't obtain them. After all, how many people possessed celestial tools? Moreover, those who possessed celestial tools were mostly Ninth Heaven Celestial Kings already, so how many of them would care about these Jade Essence Pearls? In addition, even Jade Essence Pearls were only used as lights, so just how astonishing would the true treasures of this place be? With this in mind, who would waste their time digging out these Jade Essence Pearls? It's their choice not to take them. However, I certainly won't abandon this opportunity. Not only did Ling Han start to dig, but he even called the Empress out of the celestial guest residence. She also possessed a celestial tool. With the combined power of this couple, they could naturally reach peak efficiency. Even though the Empress was extremely aloof, thinking that all matters in the world belonged to her, and that these Jade Essence Pearls should be offered to her by others, since Ling Han had spoken, she reluctantly agreed to help. Cling, 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 clang, clang, clang. They didn't pay any heed to the others as they focused on digging out the Jade Essence Pearls. In any case, so many years had already passed, so wasting some more time here wouldn't make any difference, right? They continued to dig as they advanced, and it was quite clear that Ling Han was much quicker than the Empress. Firstly, his cultivation level was higher, and secondly, the Divine Demon Sword was also more powerful than her celestial tool. In 3 days, they had already advanced several hundred meters. However, the passageway stretched on, and it was as if there were no end in sight. The person resting here, is most likely a heavenly venerate, right? Ling Han speculated. Otherwise, even a ninth heaven celestial king couldn't be so extravagant and possess so many jade essence pearls. The Empress nodded in agreement. By the looks of it, it's very likely that the remaining 6 scrolls of the 9 transformations divine scroll are hidden here. Not necessarily, Ling Han said with a shake of his head. It's impossible to guess the thoughts of Desolate Moon, so who knows what is playing at here. They continued to advance. After several more days, they finally reached the end of the passageway. However, it was also at this moment that they heard footsteps behind them. Judging from the auras, this was most likely a group of 8 celestial kings. After reaching the celestial king tier, one could easily move around without making a sound. However, these people insisted on making their footsteps heard, and this was a clear reflection of their confidence. Or perhaps this was a reflection of their arrogance and fearlessness. It wasn't long before 8 youths appeared behind the couple. Their cultivation levels varied, with some being at the 3rd heaven and others being at the 6th heaven. However, each of them carried an air of arrogance. "Leave the jade essence pearls, and then piss off," a celestial king said. Once he swept his gaze over the Empress, his face immediately lit up. He then pointed at her, and said, "Leave this woman as well. You're seeking death," the Empress said in a baleful voice. She directly drew her sword, and charged at the 8 people. "You dare!" The 8 people hurriedly moved to block her attacks. Ling Han also lashed out, blocking the 6th heaven celestial kings, and leaving the others to the Empress. They actually dared to target his wife. This naturally enraged Ling Han. His attacks were merciless, and the 2 6th heaven celestial kings were completely no match for him, killed before they could even unleash their trump cards. YUVE caused huge trouble. You killed Lord Kong Sai's only son. Lord Kong Sai is a 9th heaven monarch star who possesses a heaven-defying battle prowess. You're dead meat, the others stammered in shock. However, would the Empress pay any heed to this? Heads rolled as her celestial tool continued to dance. Ling Han sheathed his sword, saying in a relaxed manner, "I've already offended numerous 9th heaven celestial kings, so what does it matter if I offend a few more?" Chapter 2620, Forest of Lightning. Chapter 2620, Forest of Lightning. Ling Han was like a ruffian. Deep inside the ancient tomb, another group of 9th heaven celestial kings ground to a halt before bellowing in rage. This was naturally Kong Sai and the others. Ling Han paid no heed to this. He had already reached the end of the passageway, so he held hands with the Empress as he walked out. Crackle. What welcomed them was a saber-like arc of lightning that measured 300 meters in length. The Empress roared, and was just about to draw her sword. However, Ling Han immediately stepped in front of her as he threw a punch. Pa, pa, pa. Countless sparks flew into the air as the lightning smashed into his fists. The destructive power of this lightning has reached the 6th heaven, so you'll get hurt if you try to face it head-on, Ling Han said. The Empress nodded upon hearing this. No wonder it was said that only those above the 6th heaven could enter this area. In reality, what was required was a battle prowess above the 6th heaven, as only with it could one block these arcs of lightning. Otherwise, one could only flee in disarray. Gazing into the distance, it was clear that this was a forest. There were innumerable towering trees that were all glowing blue and decorated with fat and healthy leaves. Countless sparks flashed among the trees, and these sparks would occasionally join together to form an arc of lightning. Looking closely, the veins of the leaves were also brimming with terrifying arcs of electricity. "These are blue lunar lightning trees," Ling Han exclaimed in shock. Blue lunar lightning trees were a type of mysterious tree that drew from the regulations of lightning for nutrients. When they matured, they would be enveloped in lightning, and even occasionally unleash arcs of lightning into the surroundings. These attacks would possess the destructive ability of a 6th heaven celestial king. Moreover, these trees would also bear lightning core fruit, a paramount treasure for celestial kings who practiced the regulations of lightning. Ling Han swept his gaze around, yet he was unable to find a single lightning core fruit. This wasn't strange. He had arrived here so many years after the others, so it was only natural that the lightning core fruits had already been taken by the others. Perhaps the ninth heaven celestial kings were unable to dig out the jade essence pearls, or perhaps it was beneath them to do so. However, picking the lightning core fruits would be as easy as raising their hands. Thus, who would reject this bountiful offer? Ling Han turned to the Empress, saying, "You can enter the celestial guest residence to digest the jade essence pearl first. Do your best to advance as soon as possible." "Sure." Without another word, the Empress immediately entered the celestial guest residence. This place was filled with lightning that possessed the destructive ability of sixth heaven celestial kings, so it would only cause Ling Han more trouble if she remained by his side. Ling Han strode forward. Pa. Upon stepping into the forest, he instantly became a target for the brimming arcs of lightning. Crackle. Arcs of lightning cracked down at Ling Han. Haha. Even eighth heaven heavenly tribulations are a walk in the park for me, so what harm can this do? Ling Han didn't try to dodge or block the lightning at all as he walked through the forest. Pa. Arcs of lightning crashed into him, yet they failed to leave even a single mark. Ling Han's physique had already reached the sixth heaven, so even if he stood there unmoving, sixth heaven celestial kings would still need to exert a huge amount of energy to breach his defenses. Ling Han strolled through the forest of lightning as if he were strolling through a park. He was looking for lightning core fruit that the others might have missed. However, it was a shame that they had all been picked. What ninth heaven celestial kings? Just how stingy are they? They're even picking lightning core fruit. Ling Han spat. These people had completely cleaned this forest of lightning core fruits, not leaving a single one. Forget about it. I should hurry out of this place. However, he faltered just as he was about to make his way out. Strange. If this is the tomb of a heavenly venerate, then what's the point of having this forest of blue lunar lightning trees? To block tomb raiders? What a joke. Will a heavenly venerate set up a sixth heaven obstacle to block others? Hang on. Ling Han stood still. After pondering for a moment, he started to wander around the forest again. Passing through this forest wouldn't take a long time. However, going around it again and again was extremely time-consuming. After 7 days, Ling Han finally stopped again. His eyes were tightly shut, and he silently brought up the images of the past 7 days in his mind. This is a formation. However, it's not a formation used to attack or stop others. If I'm not wrong. Ling Han didn't open his eyes. Instead, he started to walk just like that. After half an hour or so, he came to a stop and opened his eyes. What appeared before him was a blue lunar lightning tree that measured more than 300 meters in height. Sure enough, this is the formation eye. A smile appeared on his face. The intention of this formation eye is to. Ling Han walked up to the tree and sat cross-legged beneath it. Crackle. All of the lightning in the forest immediately converged toward him, crackling as it smashed into him. Pass on a celestial technique. Ling Han roared with laughter as he gathered the arcs of lightning into his palms. Azure wood chaotic lightning, he murmured. Arcs of lightning flowed into his body, instantly transforming into numerous symbols that imparted some kind of secret technique. One couldn't obtain this secret technique simply by sitting under this tree. Instead, they needed to first comprehend the layout of this forest and understand how to manipulate these arcs of lightning and fuse them into symbols. Otherwise, it would be impossible to obtain any information. Ling Han called the Empress and bewitching maiden Ru out as well, allowing them to practice the azure wood chaotic lightning alongside him. Having been left by a heavenly venerate, it was certainly no ordinary technique. This was the formation eye, and Ling Han had also comprehended the layout of the entire formation. Thus, these arcs of lightning wouldn't carry any destructive ability as they crackled over. Instead, they could help one comprehend the regulations of lightning. Ling Han and the others were advancing far too quickly, so they could only choose a single regulation to focus on. However, none of them had chosen to focus on the great Tao of lightning. Thus, being able to comprehend it right now was a huge help to them. The three of them sat cross-legged as they greedily absorbed the power of lightning and comprehended the mysterious nature of the azure wood chaotic lightning. Time flew by, and in the blink of an eye, 3,000 years had already passed. The lightning in the forest was almost completely absorbed by Ling Han and the others, and they had also continued to ingest jade essence pearls while they had done so. Add to that the acceleration of time, and a whopping 3 million years had already passed in their eyes. The azure wood chaotic lightning was naturally mastered by them. With the help of the jade essence pearls, their cultivation level also improved by a significant amount. Ling Han reached the middle stage of the fifth heaven, while his two wives had already reached the pinnacle level of the fifth heaven. They weren't far from advancing to the next level. It's a shame that we finished all of the jade essence pearls. Otherwise, it would have been amazing if we had advanced to the sixth heaven in a single breath, Ling Han said with emotion. Once he advanced to the sixth heaven, he would possess the ability to battle against ordinary ninth heaven celestial kings. Even if he came across ninth heaven monarch stars, he would still be able to leave with ease and composure. Our cultivation speed is already too high. We can't be too greedy, bewitching Maiden Rue said with a smile. If this had been in the past, she wouldn't have even dreamed that she could one day become a celestial king. Meanwhile, the Empress rubbed her hands in anticipation. She was hell-bent on surpassing Heavenborn so that she could crush this detestable person who dared to wound her husband. Let's go. We've already absorbed all of the lightning in this place, Ling Han said. He extended his right hand. Crackle. Azure lightning danced in his palm, appearing as terrifying as could be. A satisfied smile spread across his face. The might of this azure wood chaotic lightning is quite astonishing. If I strike with this palm, even eighth heaven celestial kings will tremble in fear. Meanwhile, bewitching Maiden Rue was feeling extremely happy. She didn't have a celestial tool, so learning this powerful secret technique was a huge boost to her battle prowess. Huh! Ling Han was just about to speak, yet he immediately looked up ahead, only to see 5 people walking over 4 men and 1 woman. A man was in the lead, and he had 7 ribbons of iridescent light around him, which caused him to radiate with an astonishing aura. Chapter 26-21, The Might of Lightning. Chapter 26-21, The Might of Lightning. The 5 people also saw Ling Han and his 2 wives, and when they glanced over, their gazes all stopped on the Empress. The Empress' beauty was simply breathtaking. The 7th Heaven Celestial King immediately walked over in an elegant manner, saying, "Hi, I'm WN Gaujie. May I please know your name, beautiful lady?" The Empress directly ignored him, only replying with a disgusted expression. If she were Ling Han, WN Gaujie would definitely explode with killing intent and directly charge forward to kill him. However, the Empress was an aloof beauty, so her temperament and expression instead caused WN Gaujie's heart to itch. He even more so wanted to win over this thorny rose. Celestial Maiden, young Master WN is the son of WN Chengbai, someone beside the 7th Heaven Celestial King said. Lord WN Chengbai is a 9th Heaven Monarch star, and is one of the first people who entered the Celestial King graveyard. He's powerful enough to defeat a large city all by himself. To catch the eye of young Master WN is a fortune of 3 lifetimes. Moreover, young Master WAN is also a 7th Heaven Monarch tier himself, so he's destined to become a 9th Heaven Heavenly Emperor in the future. Where else are you going to find such a talented person? WN Gaujie feigned modesty, waving his hands and saying, "It's nothing, I'm merely enjoying the fortune of my father." "Aya, you're too modest, young Master WAN. If I had been young Master WAN, I would have already become as high profile as could be. Only young Master WAN can remain so modest." The 4 people continued to praise their leader. Meanwhile, the woman's face was filled with jealousy, and she said, "Say, young lady, it's not good to be so reserved. If you miss this opportunity, it might never come by again." Ling Han sighed, saying, "Are you people finished?" The 5 people were blabbering on without pause, and Ling Han couldn't help but interject. WN Gaujie scoffed upon hearing this. A measly 5th Heaven Celestial King didn't deserve any of his attention. However, he still had to feign modesty before the Empress, so he said, "Friend, how should I refer to you?" He was afraid that Ling Han was the Empress' relative, in which case it would be a bad idea to offend him. Ling Han smiled, and replied, "It doesn't matter who I am, nor do I have the time to deal with you people. Stop buzzing around like flies. You might not find it annoying, but we do." Flies. WN Gaugier and the others flared up in rage. He actually dared to call them flies. Such audacity, one of the fifth heaven celestial kings said in a baleful voice. "Young Master WN might be a cordial person, but that doesn't mean that I am too. If you're not taught a lesson, you truly won't know the heights of this heaven." He immediately lashed out, launching a palm strike at Ling Han. His attack was filled with a sense of contempt toward Ling Han. Indeed, his smack was treating Ling Han as if he were a weakling. A cold glint flashed across Ling Han's eyes as he replied with a casual palm strike of his own. "Ha, don't overestimate yourself," the fifth heaven celestial king said in a cold voice. Even though he was only an emperor tier, the cultivation technique that he practiced was extremely profound. Thus, his battle prowess was far superior to that of ordinary fifth heaven emperor tiers. The two palms quickly collided. Peng! One of the palms immediately shattered, while the other remained completely unaffected, continuing to surge forward. Pu! The fifth heaven celestial king screamed in agony. Opening his mouth, he instantly spat out a mouthful of blood. In fact, he couldn't stop vomiting blood, and in the end, even his internal organs were vomited out. He wore an aggrieved expression as he looked at the others, and with a flop of his head, he directly collapsed to the ground, dead. This. WN Gaugier and the three others were transfixed with shock. In a battle at the same cultivation level, this fifth heaven celestial king had actually been this weak? He had been killed with a single strike? Very well. Very courageous of you, WN Gaugier said in a baleful voice. Even if Ling Han were the empress brother, he would still capture him no matter what. Otherwise, wouldn't his followers become disillusioned? He stepped forward and grabbed at Ling Han. WN Gaugier was a seventh heaven celestial king, so it was only natural that he should succeed. However, Ling Han remained unfazed as he channeled the azure wood chaotic lightning. Arcs of azure lightning appeared on his right hand, and he again threw a casual palm strike at WN Gaugier. "You're seeking death," WN Gaugier said with a cold sneer. A measly fifth heaven celestial king actually dared to attack a seventh heaven celestial king head-on? Just how arrogant was this? He channeled a secret technique, aiming to kill Ling Han with a single strike. Ling Han smiled faintly. Which of them was truly seeking death? Pa! The two large hands clashed, instantly releasing a devastating shock wave that surged into the surroundings. WN Gaugier suddenly felt an overwhelming force rush over, causing him to involuntarily fly backward. Agonizing pain then shot up his right arm, and looking down, all he could see was a swathe of blood. Arcs of azure lightning chaotically flashed around, climbing up his arm. He was absolutely stupefied. With his battle prowess at the peak stage of the seventh heaven, only those with a battle prowess at the eighth heaven could break his hand with a single strike, right? But this was only a fifth heaven celestial king. WN Gaugier crashed to the ground, his body convulsing in indescribable pain and discomfort. The three remaining people were speechless with shock. They could barely accept or even begin to imagine what they were seeing. "How can you possibly be so strong?" WN Gaugier exclaimed as he crawled up. His eyes were filled with terror and jealousy as he stared at Ling Han. Just then, he had felt the creeping danger of death. However, the fact that a fifth heaven celestial king was so powerful also caused him to be filled with jealousy. If he could also possess such battle prowess, wouldn't he be able to ignore the threat of ninth heaven celestial kings? Ling Han smiled faintly. "If I'm not powerful enough, how am I going to protect my lovers? And how am I going to exterminate rascals like you?" Rascal? WN Gaugier almost went crazy with rage. He was a seventh heaven monarch tier. He was more so the descendant of a heavenly venerate. Yet, this person dared to call him a rascal? He wore a baleful expression as he looked at Ling Han. As long as he managed to flee, he would look for his father, and request him to kill Ling Han. Ling Han shook his head, saying, "You're already in my hands, yet you still want to leave this place alive." WN Gaugier humphed upon hearing this. Celestial kings were extremely difficult to kill. Even if he were slightly weaker than Ling Han, the gap between them would only be one minor level at most. Thus, if he was intent on fleeing, how could Ling Han possibly stop him? "I'll remember this," Wen Gaojie said with clenched teeth. After saying this, he immediately leaped forward. Boom! He immediately shot off at an astonishing speed. Go! Ling Han didn't give chase. Instead, he simply raised his right hand. Crackle! An arc of azure lightning transformed into a spear, which Ling Han then launched forward. The lightning spear was astonishingly quick, catching up to Wen Gaojie in a flash. It then pierced into his back, forcefully nailing him to the ground. Ah! Wen Gaojie screamed in agony. His heart was brutally penetrated by the devastating power of the lightning, and this lightning was more so chaotic as it coursed through his body. He felt as if he were being dismembered. Hurry up and release young Master Wan. He's the only son of Lord Wen Chengbai. If you kill him, your entire clan will be massacred. The three remaining people immediately started to threaten Ling Han. Ling Han replied with a wave of his right hand. Shio, shio, shio. Another 3 lightning spears flew forth, nailing all 3 people to the ground. These people were far weaker than Wen Gaojie, and their life force was instantly wiped out by the azure wood chaotic lightning. Lightning this represented the punishment of heaven and earth. This was the symbol of destruction and chaos. If Wen Gaojie hadn't been a powerful 7th heaven monarch tier, he would have already become a corpse. Let's go, Ling Han said, appearing slightly bored. Following his advance in cultivation, those who could rival him also became fewer and fewer in number. The Empress and bewitching maiden Ru nodded before following after him. Only a long time after they left did Wen Gaojie's head finally droop to the side, his vitality extinguished. Chapter 26-22, Giant Insect. Chapter 26-22, Giant Insect. Ling Han's ability to attract trouble remained the same as always. He was always able to come across second-generation young masters with astonishing backgrounds. Some coveted the Empress' beauty, while others purely wanted to cause trouble. All of these people were naturally suppressed by Ling Han. In just a few months, several hundred second-generation young masters had already died by his hands. One could imagine just how many 9th heaven celestial kings in the ancient tomb wanted his head. However, Ling Han didn't give a toss about this. In fact, he was slightly eager to come across these 9th heaven celestial kings, as battling against them would allow him to experience profound pressure, and therefore accelerate his advance to the 9th heaven. The 3 of them exited the lightning forest before crossing an incredibly wide river. They then traversed across a snowy mountain before finally entering the plains. The grass was only as tall as their feet, and it felt extremely soft and comfortable to the step. However, it was also in these plains that many celestial kings lost their lives. In fact, their blood dyed large swathes of the grass crimson red. This was extremely uncanny. Just how powerful and domineering was celestial king blood? If this blood splattered onto rocks, the rocks would immediately disintegrate and turn into dust. If it splattered onto grass and plants, then these grass and plants should have immediately exploded apart. How could it stain them like the blood of ordinary mortals? Ling Han bent down to examine it. After a moment, he frowned and said, "The domineering power of the blood has already been erased. It only contains the shell of a celestial king's might. It looks fearsome, but it's actually completely useless." "What about their corpses?" the Empress asked. They searched everywhere, but they couldn't find the corpses of the celestial kings at all. Strange. Perhaps none of them died. There were signs of an intense battle, with large swathes of the plains wrecked. Strangely, however, they could only see the blood of celestial kings and no corpses. This was seemingly at odds with what the destruction suggested. "Be careful," bewitching maiden Ru said. However, the Empress was brimming with fighting spirit. She hadn't fought for an extremely long time. They continued to advance. The plains were boundless, and it was as if they had no end. Boom! The ground before them suddenly cracked open, with a giant spear 30 meters long suddenly stabbing out from the earth, and viciously crashing down on Ling Han and the others. This spear was shrouded in the Great Tao, so even if one weren't struck, just being shaken by the fluctuations of the Great Tao alone would already cause enough trouble. The Empress humphed as she slashed down at the spear. Wang. Her sword struck the giant spear. Celestial tools were invincible, and those that weren't celestial tools or ninth heaven celestial kings would be unable to rival them. Thus, the giant spear was instantly cut in two, causing grey liquid to spray into the air. However, the Empress was also sent flying back. The momentum of the giant spear had been far too great, far more than what the Empress was able to resist. Zhi. There was a deafening squeak as a giant being suddenly tunneled out from the ground. This was a giant insect with 6 legs. It measured 60 or so meters in length, and only one of its 2 spear-like forelegs remained right now. This was because the other one had been severed by the Empress. Its body was covered in black scales, and it was also enveloped in an eerie aura of death. It was as if this insect were a monster that had crawled out from the depths of hell. It glared at the Empress as grey blood continued to flow from its severed leg. However, this bleeding quickly stopped, and there was a black glow as the severed leg started to regenerate. In just a few seconds, the regeneration was already complete. The giant insect howled before stomping 4 of its legs and lunging at the Empress. Meanwhile, its 2 forelegs lashed out at the Empress' jade-like neck. Ling Han humphed as he flashed over, immediately blocking the giant insect's path. He then reached over to grab at the giant insect. The giant insect naturally couldn't ignore him, so it changed the direction of one of its slashing forelegs, targeting Ling Han instead. Ling Han raised his right palm and channeled the azure wood chaotic lightning. He then combined this with the power of the 9 transformations divine scroll before unleashing a punch. Wang. The foreleg of the giant insect was like a divine spear, and in comparison, Ling Han's fist appeared absolutely tiny and inconsequential. The outcome of this clash was seemingly clear for all to see. However, when the giant leg actually collided with Ling Han's fist, there was a blinding flash of light as it was surprisingly sent flying back. Crack! A crack appeared on the giant leg, and this crack continued to spread further and further. In just an instant, cracks had already enveloped the entire leg. Pa! The giant leg surprisingly shattered into pieces. This brought the giant insect immense pain, causing it to continuously emit a strange scream. Balls of nether flames erupted from its body, signifying its white-hot fury. This time, however, the giant insect didn't immediately launch an attack. Instead, it stared at Ling Han with its lantern-sized eyes that were filled with apprehension. Even though it was a violent being, it still possessed innate alertness to danger. It recognized that Ling Han was extremely powerful, so it couldn't act in a rash manner. However, Ling Han naturally wouldn't give it time to rest, continuing to charge forward and throwing a punch at the giant insect's head. The giant insect hurriedly reared its forelegs to block. Peng! However, how could it block Ling Han's attacks? Its thick scales were instantly cracked open, after which Ling Han charged inside its head with azure lightning enveloping his body. The giant insect's movements immediately froze. Pa! After a short moment, it crashed to the ground, with a gaping hole appearing in its scales. Ling Han strode out of this hole with azure lightning around him, not a single mark on his body. Those celestial king corpses were mostly eaten by such things, right? Bewitching Maiden Ru said. Ling Han nodded in confirmation. Many celestial kings had definitely died in this place, yet there was no corpse in sight. Thus, it was only natural that they had entered the stomachs of these giant insects. He grabbed a leg of the giant insect and started to carefully examine it. Astonishment spread across his face, and he said, "There are many thin and hollow spikes on these legs. With a single swipe, it can send countless of these spikes into one's body. It can then use them to absorb the essence from one's blood. That being the case, even the blood shed by celestial kings would only be ordinary blood. Thus, they would be unable to cause any destruction. Let's go." However, after a short while, they were attacked by another giant insect. When these insects remained hidden underground, their auras would be completely concealed, thus rendering them impossible to discover. Only when they broke through the surface of the earth to attack would one be able to discover them. To fifth heaven and sixth heaven celestial kings, however, this would already be too late. Fortunately, Ling Han and his two wives were no ordinary fourth heaven or fifth heaven celestial kings. Thus, they were entirely capable of dealing with these giant insects. After a dozen or so days, they finally made their way out of the plains. What appeared before them was a small river that even had a wooden bridge spanning over it. Beside this bridge was a small grass hut, in front of which sat an elder on the ground. He was smoking a water pipe which was gurgling with bubbles. A large group of people stood around this elder, and they all wore sulky expressions as if they had come across an insurmountable difficulty. Looking closely, they discovered that this elder was actually engaged in a game of Go with someone else. His tactics were extraordinary, and it was thus that he had the room to smoke his water pipe. Meanwhile, his opponent's movements were stiff, with his brows knitted into a deep frown. "What's going on?" Ling Han tapped the shoulder of the person in front of him, and asked, "Brother, what's this all about?" The person was given a fright. A person had actually approached him without him noticing their aura. If Ling Han hadn't tapped his shoulder, and had instead attacked him, wouldn't he have already become a corpse? However, upon discovering that Ling Han was only at the fifth heaven, he involuntarily heaved a sigh of relief. No matter what, he was still a sixth heaven celestial king. It was most likely because he was engrossed in the game of Go that he hadn't noticed the approach of this brat. With his temper, he should have turned back around and ignored Ling Han. After all, how dared a fifth heaven celestial king question a sixth heaven celestial king? However, upon seeing Ling Han's mighty and dignified countenance, the man changed his mind for some unknown reason, replying, "If you want to cross this river, you have to first beat this old man in a game of Go." Chapter 26-23, Playing a Game of Go. Chapter 26-23, Playing a Game of Go. To cross the river? Ling Han asked in astonishment. Isn't that simple? This river was only 30 or so meters in width, so couldn't it be crossed with a casual leap? It's not that simple, the burly man who looked around 30 years old replied. His eyes were clouded by a layer of black that radiated with an aura of bloodlust. This was a sign that he had been affected by the black energy of this place. However, he didn't attack Ling Han, and this was because he had been intimidated by the invisible might of Ling Han. However, he didn't realize this himself. He continued, "If you're a seventh heaven, eighth heaven, or ninth heaven celestial king, you can naturally cross this river with ease. However, those beneath these levels will be obliterated into smithereens by the river water if they try to forcefully cross." "Huh? It's that powerful?" Ling Han casually asked. "I know, right? Otherwise, how could we have been stopped here?" the burly man said. He pointed his chin in the direction of the elder, and said, "He isn't a real person, but he's unbelievably powerful. He's guarding that bridge, and those who try to force their way over will only be killed and tossed into the river by him. Of course, it's still possible to cross the bridge if you want. You just have to beat him in a game of Go first. However, this isn't any ordinary game of Go. You'll know if you try. Pu." As if providing further information for this remark, the person sitting before the elder suddenly spat a mouthful of blood in a violent manner. His face instantly became as white as a sheet. Thud, thud, thud. He stumbled back 7 steps, after which he swayed for a short while, and almost collapsed headfirst into the ground. Defeated again. Sigh. Moving the pieces requires one to use their divine sense. Once the pieces are eaten, their divine sense will also be wounded. This person has already lost 3 times, so it's very likely that his divine sense has already been wounded to the limit. Sigh. I've already been here for 16 years, yet I've only seen 7 people successfully crossing this bridge. This is far too difficult. Everyone shook their head in disappointment. They had all challenged the elder to a game of Go before, yet which of them hadn't suffered humiliating defeat? Which of them hadn't had their divine sense wounded? Ling Han's interest was involuntarily piqued. He strode over and sat down before the old man. Who is this brat? He's a new arrival, right? I haven't seen him before. Heh, the youth knows no fear. Does he think this will be easy? They all chattered among themselves. Shut up, the Empress chided in a cold voice. Just who do you think you? Someone instinctively retorted, but upon seeing the Empress' stunningly beautiful and aloof face, they couldn't help but feel stifled. How could they still speak? How beautiful. How can such a breathtaking beauty exist in the world? The Empress' peerless beauty instantly elicited cries of astonishment from the crowd. Many people stared at her with greed and lust. They were all affected by the black energy, so they had all become bloodthirsty and fearless, with their senses of respect and apprehension greatly reduced. She's mine, a person shouted as they immediately lunged over, grabbing at the Empress. She was only a measly fourth heaven, so capturing her would naturally be as easy as could be. Whoosh! There was a flash of ice-cold light as the Empress drew her sword, slashing down at that person. How could that person have known that the Empress, a fourth heaven celestial king, actually possessed a celestial tool? He simply thought that he could suppress the Empress with his sixth heaven cultivation. Moreover, because he had been afraid of others snatching her first, he had lunged over with all his might. He hadn't just reached over, as that would have increased the risk of others snatching the Empress away first. Anyhow, apart from ninth heaven celestial kings, who else could block the might of celestial tools? With a single slash, that person had already been cut in two at the waist. Blood sprayed through the air, after which intestines and organs also started to spill out. Death soon followed. Everyone was rendered speechless with shock. That was a sixth heaven celestial king, yet, a fourth heaven celestial king had actually killed them with a single slash. Who could believe this? After mulling over this carefully, they immediately discovered that it wasn't the Empress who was powerful enough to kill the sixth heaven celestial king in a single strike. Instead, it was because the celestial king had been too rash, and it was because of the deadly weapon in the Empress' hand. That was a celestial tool. Their gazes became even more fervent. Not only was she a peerless beauty, but she even possessed a powerful celestial tool. Who could resist such temptation? This was the Celestial King Graveyard, a realm with no rules and regulations. Moreover, these people had all been affected by the black energy, so they were more so reckless and unafraid. However, Ling Han didn't pay any attention to this. The Empress was almost at the fifth heaven, so combined with the might of the celestial tool, she was more than capable of dealing with these people. After all, they were only sixth heaven celestial kings at most. Indeed, those at the seventh heaven could directly cross the river and leave. He calmly sat down, beginning a game of Go with the Elder. In this game of Go, he took on the black pieces, meaning that he had the first move. The Elder naturally assumed the white pieces. After placing a single piece, Ling Han immediately let out a soft exclamation. This was because the piece surprisingly absorbed a fraction of his divine sense, causing the piece to become a part of him. The Elder continued to smoke his water pipe as he contested territory with Ling Han. Pa, pa, pa. In the beginning, they were both lightning quick as they placed their pieces. After 30 or so moves, however, they started to slow down. There were more and more things to consider and calculate. Not only that, but much of Ling Han's divine sense had also been absorbed after completing the 30 or so moves. This naturally affected his calculation and decision-making abilities. He became slower and slower, with each move consuming much more time. However, there was a sand glass beside the Go board, and the sand inside it would start to flow each time it was his turn to move. The sand inside would completely flow to the bottom after around 30 seconds. If he failed to make his move before this, it would count as his defeat. Ling Han made maximum use of this time, not making his move until the moment the time was about to expire. Both he and the Elder remained calm and composed. Meanwhile, the Empress was unleashing her deadly fury, with her divine sword dancing around, and causing her to appear like a celestial maiden gracefully dancing among the clouds. However, her dance was one that ended life after life. Chapter 26-24, Divine Fluid Raging Lightning. Chapter 26-24, Divine Fluid Raging Lightning. Before long, Ling Han and the Elder approached the endgame. In this stage, both parties would rapidly consume the pieces of their opponent. Thus, the game would be filled with a sense of killing intent. Ling Han's brows were tightly knitted together. With each black piece that was consumed, his divine sense would suffer another blow, causing him to feel increasing discomfort. If it had been someone with a weaker divine sense, their mind and willpower would have extremely likely already collapsed at this point. If it weren't a failure to place a piece in time, it would be a severe wound causing them to misplace a piece, thereby leading to a complete collapse and eventual loss. It was no wonder that few people could defeat this elder in a game of Go. It was simply because their divine sense wasn't powerful enough. With the learning ability of celestial kings, even if they didn't know how to play Go, they could easily become a master after watching a few games. Thus, this wasn't the main obstacle that the celestial kings faced. Fortunately, Ling Han's divine sense had already been tempered by the indestructible Heaven Scroll, which allowed it to become as stable as a mountain. Thus, he remained unfazed and unaffected. He placed piece after piece, resolutely defending his advantage and not allowing greed to cloud his judgment. After another 30 minutes, the results were already set in stone. Ling Han won by 3.5 pieces. Pass, the elder said. Ling Han smiled faintly. Even though his divine sense had been wounded to a certain degree, the process of the game had also been equivalent to a process of tempering his divine sense. Thus, he had also received some benefits as well. Looking around, he discovered that the surroundings were already covered in blood, with heads and corpses littering the ground. The Empress had already concluded her slaughter. However, not everyone had been killed, though the people closest to them were a whopping 50 kilometers away, not daring to get any closer to the brutal murderer in the Empress. Are you two going to have a game of Go with the old man, or do you want to enter the celestial guest residence? Ling Han asked. I'll have a game, the Empress said as she sheathed her sword. She sat down before the old man to play a game of Go with him. Meanwhile, bewitching Maiden Rue shook her head. She was most afraid of racking her brains. The Empress started a game with the old man. In fact, she was extraordinarily skilled in Go, far more skilled than Ling Han. Moreover, her divine sense was also extremely tough, so even though she was affected a little, she still won by a huge advantage of 5 pieces. They both won the right to use the bridge to cross the river. They exchanged a smile before holding hands and walking onto the bridge. The river flowed very slowly, yet they could clearly see the black lightning crackling within it. Even through the bridge, they could still feel an overwhelming pressure bearing down on them. Huh! Ling Han suddenly stopped in his tracks, staring at the river, and saying, "This seems similar to the blue lunar lightning trees from before." The Empress' eyes lit up, and she exclaimed, "Perhaps this river contains another lightning element secret technique?" "Let's have a look," Ling Han said. Looking down like this, they could only see the arcs of lightning within the river. However, they couldn't rely on this to obtain the secret technique. Just like in the forest, they had to first find the formation eye and familiarize themselves with the layout of the area. Only then could they absorb the lightning into their bodies. Otherwise, they would only be attacked by the lightning. Upon seeing them walk onto the bridge, the celestial kings that had fled into the distance finally dared to return. However, when they saw the two people walking back and forth on the bridge, they couldn't help but bare their teeth in frustration. Were these two people going to cross the bridge or not? Could they give a clear indication? Just wandering around back and forth. Were they trying to frighten the others or what? The people who had beaten the elder in the past had all crossed the bridge without any hesitation. Which of them had been like these two? Did they find this fun or what? However, they didn't dare to speak up against Ling Han and the Empress. After all, what if the Empress suddenly developed bloodlust again? Who could endure that? Here. Ling Han had been observing the bridge the entire time. This was a wooden bridge, yet different sections of it had been painted in different colors, separating the bridge into distinct brackets, some big and some small. Each bracket varied in size. Right now, he was standing in a bracket that seemingly commanded the entire bridge. He instantly felt a different sensation. He shared his discovery with the Empress, who also walked over to observe the surroundings from this angle. After a while, they sat down and extended their hands. Crackle. As if being manipulated by some mystical power, the black lightning in the river instantly shot into the air, smashing toward Ling Han and the Empress. The originally calm river immediately became tumultuous, with countless arcs of lightning zapping around and enveloping Ling Han and the Empress, transforming them into balls of lightning. Divine fluid raging lightning, Ling Han and the Empress exclaimed in their minds. After entering their bodies, these arcs of black lightning also transformed into numerous symbols. This was the materialization of the regulations of the Great Tao. Azure wood chaotic lightning, divine fluid raging lightning. This is the act of imbuing the 5 elements into lightning, Ling Han said. He couldn't help but sing words of praise, saying, "How incredible and wonderful. The person who flawlessly combined the great Tao of lightning with the 5 elements and created this cultivation technique is far too genius." The Empress nodded in agreement. Cultivation techniques had been developed for heaven knew how many years, so it was only natural that countless prodigies had also walked this world. Judging from this, there should also be metal lightning, earth lightning, and fire lightning, Ling Han said. I have a feeling that these 5 types of divine lightning can be fused together. At that time, using the 5 elements to cast lightning attacks will definitely result in astonishing destructive ability. This is a heavenly venerate technique, the Empress exclaimed. It's similar to the 9 transformations divine scroll. That senior split the divine scroll into 9 scrolls, allowing even first heaven celestial kings to practice it. Meanwhile, this is a technique wherein lightning is contained within the 5 elements. It works in a similar manner to the 9 transformations divine scroll. The wisdom of our predecessors is truly eye-opening, Ling Han exclaimed in praise. The two of them stopped talking, instead focusing their full attention on absorbing the power of the lightning. This was not only the regulations of lightning, but also the regulations of water. Thus, absorbing the power of this lightning could elevate their comprehension of both water and lightning. After observing the seated and silent Ling Han and Empress for several days, the celestial kings were finally unable to contain their urge to return. What are they doing? Manipulating the lightning to enter their bodies? Are they seeking death? That stunning beauty. What a great shame. That celestial maiden doesn't even blink when she massacres people. Do you want to seek death? However, if they've truly died, then why isn't the lightning stopping? Gasp. Perhaps they haven't died. They're being attacked by such terrifying lightning, yet they're still not dead. Everyone found this to be inconceivable. However, after 1 day, 10 days, and 100 days, their feelings of shock and disbelief gradually transformed into numbness and acceptance. It was as if the bridge had always been so. They started to compete with the elder again, attempting to beat him and win the chance to cross the bridge. However, it was a pity that no one managed to succeed. 1 year, 10 years, 100 years. Time flew, and it was only natural that many newcomers arrived. Upon discovering the tumultuous river, they were naturally transfixed with shock. After learning that there were actually 2 people amid the lightning, however, all of them scoffed in doubt. Were these people taking them for fools? How could someone survive in such chaotic lightning? Moreover, for 100 years, no less. However, no one could beat the elder, so it was only natural that no one could approach the balls of lightning to observe them. It wasn't that no one had attempted to force their way across the bridge. However, these people had all been easily captured by the elder and tossed into the river. There, they were instantly blasted into smithereens by the magnificent power of the chaotic lightning. Only those with a battle prowess at the 7th heaven possessed the right to cross the river. 500 years, 1,000 years, 2,000 years. More and more people converged in front of the bridge. Finally, an elite also arrived. He was clearly at the 6th heaven, yet he possessed a battle prowess at the 7th heaven. With a single slash, he parted the lightning and calmly crossed the river. Gasp! Who is this person? He's only at the 6th heaven, yet he possesses a battle prowess at the 7th heaven. Is this a monarch star? Definitely. Otherwise, Even monarch tiers at the peak stage of the 6th heaven can only possess a battle prowess at the 6th heaven. It's impossible for them to enter the territory of the 7th heaven. He's called Miao Yingui, and he's a prodigy from Ice Origin City, someone said in a proud voice. Upon seeing the others look over, he chuckled and said, "This untalented person is called Changji. I'm merely an insignificant follower of young Master Miao. Young Master Miao is destined to sweep through the entire world," he exclaimed with shining eyes. His face was filled with respect and reverence. Chapter 26-25, Miao Yingui. Chapter 26-25, Miao Yingui. Even though Changji's words were extremely exaggerated, none of the surrounding celestial kings could refute his claims. After all, Miao Yingui's strength had been displayed for all of them to see. Once he unleashed his 7th heaven battle prowess, he could massacre all of them with ease. His battle prowess is nothing more than the 7th heaven, someone muttered quietly. The stunning beauty from before was only at the peak stage of the 4th heaven, yet she possessed a battle prowess at the peak stage of the 6th heaven. Someone beside them nodded, saying, even though that was thanks to her celestial tool, her strength alone was still at least at the 6th heaven. To surpass 2 cultivation levels. She's even more powerful than monarch stars. Even more powerful than me? Miao Yingui asked. None of them had noticed that he had already split apart the lightning and returned at some time. The 2 people who had spoken hurriedly shut their mouths. Even though they were also at the 6th heaven, they knew that they were no match for Miao Yingui. If conflict occurred, their only option would be to flee. Otherwise, they would definitely be killed. Speak. Miao Yingui said with a cold humph. Who can surpass me, Miao Yingui? The 2 people didn't want to leave, thus they obediently told him about the Empress and her feats. She merely relied on her celestial tool. Miao Yingui said in disdain. His voice became low, so low that only he could hear what he said as he muttered, to possess a celestial tool. Either she's a descendant of a 9th heaven celestial king from this place, or she's an outsider who's come here to train. His eyes were gleaming. Even though he was extremely talented, he didn't have the support of a heavenly venerate, so he naturally didn't possess a celestial tool. His eyes were red with lust. Regarding the Empress beauty, however, he didn't believe this at all. Before entering the Celestial King graveyard, he had also been surrounded by countless beauties. What kind of stunning beauty hadn't he seen? The bumpkins in the Celestial King graveyard had seen far too few beauties, so even those who were slightly more attractive would be regarded as stunning beauties. He pointed to the bridge and asked, "You're telling me that those 2 people are inside the balls of lightning?" After receiving an affirmative answer, he replied with a shake of his head. Even with his strength, he still couldn't withstand the attacks of such lightning for too long. This was to say nothing of enduring it for several thousand years. These 2 people were definitely spreading rumors. How could measly 4th heaven celestial kings achieve such a feat? Let me have a look. He strode toward the bridge. You can't, someone shouted. If you attempt to cross the bridge without beating the elder in a game of Go First, you'll be tossed into the river and killed. Humph. Do I, Miao Yingui, have anything to be afraid of? Miao Yingui said as he strode forward. He didn't believe the nonsense of these people at all. He quickly arrived at the foot of the bridge. After hesitating for a brief moment, he ultimately decided to stride forward. Whoosh. There was a flash of lightning as the elder eerily appeared on the bridge. He then reached over to grab at Miao Yingui. Do you think I'm afraid of you? Miao Yingui said with a sneer. He replied with a palm strike of his own. Peng. The elder's hand swooped down, and Miao Yingui's counterattack crumbled into a feeble heap. He was easily captured. Ninth Heaven Celestial King, he exclaimed through clenched teeth. The gulf between them was far too great. Facing such an elite, his only fate was being suppressed. The elder didn't speak at all. Instead, he simply swung his hand. Pa. Miao Yingui was tossed into the river. A burst of brilliant light erupted around Miao Yingui as he surprisingly dashed out of the river, hovering in mid-air. His eyes were filled with anger and resentment. He didn't die. This is unbelievable. As expected of a prodigy, he's far too powerful. Everyone exclaimed in astonishment. This was the first time they had seen someone survive after being tossed into the river. However, Miao Yingwei didn't appear proud at all. When he was tossed into the river, his cultivation had actually been sealed. Thus, his only option had been to await death. However, he possessed a rare treasure, one that he had obtained from an ancient site. This rare treasure would only activate when he came across a life-and-death situation, and it could only be used a single time. Just then, this rare treasure had unleashed its might. This signified that he had already died once. He had obtained nothing, yet he had wasted a life-saving treasure. How could he be happy? He sat down cross-legged next to the river. Right now, he was even more intent on obtaining the celestial tool. Otherwise, he would feel far too much regret. 100 years, 200 years. Finally, the lightning became weaker and weaker, revealing Ling Han and the Empress. As if sensing this, Miao Yingwei immediately opened his eyes. Upon glancing over, astonishment instantly swept over his face. Surprisingly, there were indeed two people inside the balls of lightning. Moreover, they were only at the fourth heaven and the fifth heaven. This was absolutely unfathomable. You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories,